Hello, HR Stories podcast listeners. Producer Samantha dropping in again to welcome you to our 2024 Top 10 Q&A wrap-up. Q&A episodes are a favorite of the team as they get a chance to connect with and support you, the listeners. Be sure to email us your HR questions and stories at email@team@hrstories.com to hear your question featured. Don't worry, we can keep it anonymous. Enjoy this trip down 2024 memory lane and join us next week for some great content to prepare you for 2025. Happy holidays. On to the first question.
Okay, this is from Brittany on from the community, the Facebook HR Team of One community, and she says she posted it out there for the group. She says, "Does anybody have any good ideas on how to make your Indeed postings stand out and look less basic and dry?" And I understand with Indeed, but any job postings, John, what do you think could help make them look less basic and dry?
Why should I, as a candidate, choose you? Why should I choose your organization? Now, Chuck, you and I have been in HR. We've been hiring people for years. And there was back in the day, you would just put up an ad, right? And 100 people would come back and just apply for it, right? It's not happening today. Really start with what I call that bold statement, right? That why would it be good for me to work for you? Now, it has to be factual, Chuck, right? We can't be like, come work for us and you'll get a new car. Well, maybe you will, right? So if some of those jobs out there, you might get a new car, right? But you got to figure out what it is for you there. And I always, when we do this in a workshop, I always say, okay, I want 2 sentences that's going to grab my attention and then suck me in to be like, oh, I need to read all this. I was doing this exercise and there was a person in my course and I forget what she was doing. But so she started out, great benefits, great da-da-da-da. But like halfway through, she said, you get to work mom hours. And so first I had to qualify what mom hours were. But what she was saying is that these jobs were during school time, right? And so during school time, and so that's your lead in, right? That should be up top and it should be maybe not mom hours, right? Because we don't want to discriminate, right? We want to be inclusive, but do you want to work while your kid's in school? Right?
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh, I'm interested. That's something that I'm looking for. Now I'm going to read the rest of the ad, right? And so again, it's like writing a newspaper, right? Writing that ad in there and doing that. So that's my 2 cents. I know you've had experience with this, so I'd love to hear what you think as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I could just put ditto, but I will give you a technical aspect about Indeed and even Monster, a few other places. They do allow you to bold font. So when you do that first statement or two, you could put it in bold up top. And they also allow italicized too, if you want to make it stand out from the regular job posting. The one thing I always say, John, is don't make the job posting look like a job description. Right. Okay. Don't make it look at a job description. But in regards to what you said, I'll give you an example. I was hiring nurses for a Medicare supplement company. They needed nurse reviewers, right? Well, what do nurses work? They're working crazy hours, 410s, the overnight shifts, late shifts, and all this stuff. Hey, guess what? How would you like to work Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. year round with weekends off? What? Okay. You want to talk about a bold statement up front that got attention? That got attention. And so things like that, exactly what you said, that's another example of to play on what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the other thing is...
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
okay. The other thing is the theming it. So I'm now functioning temporarily as a HR director down at a resort in the Florida Keys, right? So in addition to being the team at HR Stories here, folks, I also do consulting. John does consulting, and part of my consulting takes me to places where I'm a temporary HR director. And so I'm rewriting the job postings. We're in the Florida Keys. We're at a 4-star resort, 4 diamonds. The restaurant has been recognized by Forbes, and so I put that up front. Hey, work in the Florida Keys, check out this award-winning restaurant, Four Diamond Resort. This is for an executive sous chef. An executive sous chef is someone that's out there looking for their next gig, their next really great thing to put on their resume, to build themselves. That's appealing to them. The old job description said, job title, executive chef, reports to executive chef, status, exempt. Job
Right.
duties, must do this, and this.
Yeah.
Experience, boom, boom. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. We're gonna. I call it zhooshing it up.
Yeah.
We're gonna zhoosh it up.
Yeah.
So I just wrote that today, and the GM here and everyone, they love it. So, anyways, theming it for the culture engagement is a big piece too.
Yeah. Again, why should I choose you, right? Why should the candidate choose your organization? You have to sell it. It's mini marketing. Let's do it. All right. This one's an interesting one. It came up in one of my classes, in one of my workshops. I had an individual, Nolly from California, and he said, I have a question. Our handbook says we cannot wear anything vulgar, but we don't have anything about vulgar bumper stickers on personal vehicles. Can managers order individuals to cover their vulgar bumper stickers on their personal vehicles?
Yeah. So my guess is, if I just had to put context, that the person asking the question probably had a bumper sticker on their car, and they got kind of dinged for it. And they said, where does it say in the handbook that I can't have this on my car, but I can't wear anything? Wow. All right. So let me think. If I'm a business and I have a private parking lot and my customers, maybe I'm a doctor's office and my nurses and my receptionists park there, and my clients, my customers, my patients, and I have an employee with some sort of really vulgar sticker on it. It's I'm a pediatrician. I mean, I get that, right? I get that, and I think if it's on your private property and you have kind of a reason for it, you might be able to, but it might be hard pressed, I think, to enforce that. I don't know. That's a really great question. But if it's a public parking lot, public street, then absolutely, you're good luck. But if it's your property, people are parking on your property. And I'll give you an example that has to do with the bumper stickers. We, at one company that I worked for, we said no smoking on property. So people thought they could go into their car and smoke. And we were enforcing it, saying, no, there's no smoking on property. Your car is on property, you're on property, you're smoking. So people would have to get into their car, drive off property, just across the street, park, and they would smoke, and then they would drive back. And that's how it was. A little weird and really, really ridiculous, shall we say, but it was our property, and that's what we said. So does that answer the question?
I think it's a good thought. I think you walked through that really well and kind of gave them something to think about. I just wanted to go back to the handbook policy that says we cannot wear anything vulgar on our outfits, right? And so there's a lot of talk about this. The National Labor Relations Board, we did that whole conversation about Home Depot and the BLM and that kind of stuff. And so I do think having those strict policies in place in terms of what you're wearing is really important. You have to be consistent across the board. I think the problem is the term vulgar. What does that mean? Who does that mean it to, right? And so you may want to be a little more specific on what that. It's so funny how you looked at that story as you thought, oh, somebody got dinged and they want to know, is that the right thing to do? I was thinking it was somebody that was walking through and was offended by a bumper sticker and was like, can I tell my boss that I'm offended by that? And am I going to get in trouble? Yeah, right. So the whole opposite story in my head. And so I do think if you're right, if it's your company, you're private, you could probably say, look, you can't have that bumper sticker on there. To me, though, is that the hill you want to die on, right? Is it really that important? I don't know. Again, if a lot of employees came to me and I said, oh, we saw this bumper sticker, it really upset us, then maybe I would talk to the employee, but I don't know if I would put something in place about it. I don't know if I want to cross that line, but that's me personally. I don't know how I would handle that.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, and we'll wrap it up here, but I could see a small company with a small parking lot, and people walk by the parking lot that represents us. I don't know. I could maybe just look, back your car in, and rather than and let's just all be friends at the end of the day. But like you said, is that the hill you want to die on fighting for? So, all right, great question.
I think those are the questions I think we face a lot of times in HR, where there's not a specific law, there's not a specific thing, and just trying to understand what is the right choice for our organization. How do we be strategic about that? I think is important.
Jamie from Florida. Jamie says, hey, how do you create a suitable employee handbook for our company? Wow.
Yeah. I call Chuck up and I say, hey, Chuck, we need to get an employee handbook here. It's interesting because there are so many employee handbook templates that are out there. We know of an organization that has an employee handbook creator, which is the one that I use in my business most of the time. So I use that. Employment lawyers can do it. And I think what it comes down to is cost and what are you going to use that employee handbook for?
Yeah.
Right. And so obviously, you have all the money in the world, I would hire an employment lawyer to do it. If you don't have all the money in the world, I would either use a template or a program to create that. So if you have a third-party payroll company, they probably have something. I don't think I would ever try to start one from scratch.
No. Most of us have worked at other companies where we could, use our old handbook and kind of look, I've read so many handbooks and worked at a number of companies as a HR director and as a consultant. It's almost like they all look the same. They read the same. It's like, I don't know, some caveman started an employee handbook and we've all been using the same template, just been refining it for thousands and thousands of years. But Jamie's lucky that Jamie, I'm going to guess she, but it could be he. Jamie is from Florida, so there aren't a lot of state laws, but obviously make sure you know your state laws, use your handbook creator, whatever you choose. And then when you're done, always run it by an attorney. Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. I mean, again, I think, we give a lot of advice out here, but I always tell people you got to run it by your employment lawyer, but it's better to build it than ask them to build it, right? Because they're going to bill you at $100, $200 an hour, $300 an hour. And if you can build it and get it to a condition where they can just go through it quickly. Yep, this is right. This is right. Oh, don't forget, we're in Orlando. There's a special rule about this. Always kind of good to do that as well. I know you've done this a lot because I know you do a lot of consulting work. You go to the organization and you notice that there's not job descriptions. How do you handle that? What's your process to handle that?
Well, here's the deal. If there's no job descriptions at all, we got other problems that are probably going to be bigger. In other words, like a company that hasn't done their job descriptions probably doesn't have a lot of other things in place. So I don't go into the job descriptions right away because there's always other things. However, in order to do any job postings, I got to have some sort of job description. They're two different things, right? So I'll at least see if we have any job postings of all the jobs that we have. So I'll start matching things up at least. That's a good process to start with. What do I have? What scraps of survival gear can I pull together from the wreckage, shall we say? What about you, John?
Well, I think that's a good place to start. I mean, I don't think that's the process. I think that's a good place to start, because you need to see what's available, right? And so you go through your files, you look at your job postings, you look at your job descriptions, and then in those places where it's not meeting your expectations, so maybe there is a job description, but it's missing work context, tools, and technology. It's missing those important parts that that are important. You're going to kind of create a list, and then you're going to have to kind of triage them. Like, where is it most important to do? And then you're going to have to sit down with the manager and go, all right, what's the purpose of this job? What are the tasks and responsibilities? What are the skills and knowledge needed? What are the tools they use? And really go through that. Now, let's talk about a couple shortcuts to this. For me, I always use ONET online, because they have tons of information about any job out there, right? And so again, you may not have a job title that they have. You're going to find a lot of information. They're going to give you some really good task, and maybe that job doesn't do the task, and remove it, right? And so you kind of go there. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot of people are using, Mr. Chuck, is AI. And so I know historically, Chuck, that you may have used AI a little bit to do your job descriptions.
Well, here's what I've done. I've taken the notes that managers share with me. I've taken the scraps that I have found, and I will put them into an AI, and I will say, okay, based on this, let's start with a job description. So I think if you just go to AI and say, create me a job description for a food and beverage manager, you're going to get but if you take your stuff, put it in there and say, now take this and create a food, that's a whole different thing. So, but it does polish things up. So yes.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a good way. Using ONET, doing that, pulling all that together is a good way to kind of set that up. And the last thing, so now we've created the job description, definitely show it to the employee, have them go through it. I always say, and I don't know if you agree with this, Chuck, I always say the person in the role knows the role the best, and they can say, yep, I do that, or I don't do that, or guy, I never used that tool.
Exactly.
They can give you that. Now, you may want to elevate that job description because you're going to think about hiring somebody that needs more knowledge, or they're going to change the role a little bit, but they're going to give you a good, yep, this is what I do, or you guys are crazy. I don't do any of these things. And so just making sure that it matches the job that you have, not this job on the we dream, right? So just being aware of that.
Yeah, no, I like that process. That's great. It sounds like a checklist.
Yeah, I think we have that in there. We do in our ultimate book of HR checklists. There is a job description checklist in there. So definitely something worthwhile to check in there. All right.
Can I hold an employee responsible for behavior that they participate in or they demonstrate outside of work, off the clock, on their own time? So, for example, the person posted, they were anonymous, so so we don't know who or what, but the person was or where they were from, but they said they had an employee that was riding the bus to work, and it was in the morning. And if I recall the situation, the employee got into an argument with profanity with another passenger. And then when the bus stops, the passenger then sees that employee, that person that they got in an argument, come into our business, they realize, oh my gosh, that person that was so rude to me, that yelled at me, used all the profanity, they work for that company. So they complain to the company. And so now, if this is my employee that got the complaint by someone right on the bus, can I tell them, hey, you're not representing us, and therefore we are writing you up, therefore we are firing you? Basically, can we discipline them for conduct
that is not related to us if we think it makes the company look bad? So that's the question.
Yeah, so a lot of things to kind of unpack here, right? And so let me tell you a story. Back in the day, right, before social media, we were always told if we were wearing the company uniform, you better act on the best behalf, right? So if you're out there, you're acting on the behalf of the company, you're out doing conventions, whatever you're doing, you have the company uniform on, you better act under the code of conduct the company presents, right? So you need to do that. And if not, we would discipline them. We would discipline them and take them out. I think it's a little different. Your bus example is a little different, right? Because this happens off work. They weren't representing the company. I would tell the employee and I would do an investigation for sure. Because again, do not jump to the conclusion that it actually happened. Do not jump to the conclusion that your employee was in the wrong. And I would have, in this case, I would have a conversation with them and say, we're going to do an investigation. We got this complaint. We want to find out what happened. We want to talk to you. We want to talk to this other person, kind of dig a little deeper, kind of figure out what happened. But probably I'm not going to fire that person, but I'm going to have a conversation. Now, I would also say, Chuck, what other performance or other documentation or discipline do I have on that employee? If this is a trend that he yells and curses at people, then I'm firing the person probably.
Yeah. Well, the poster, there was a lot of discussion on this one, and someone said, well, you employ at will, you can do whatever you want. I guess it'd be like if I was driving to work and I gave someone, let's say, the middle finger, then pulled in the employee parking lot. Oh my gosh, they're not representing us. And here's the deal, John. If the situation with someone else outside of work got into some sort of discriminatory practices, or they were based on race, religion, sex, things like that, I might have a concern about that. If they are wearing the company uniform or a company shirt, and I would have maybe a concern about that. We did the same thing at Disney. We allowed employees to wear their uniforms home. We told them you got to take your name tag off and you can't go into a bar, right? So, so there were those, little guidelines there. But I would say overall, could you discipline them? Yes. Would you want to? I don't know. Once again, what's that world of HR? Maybe, it depends, right? Yes, no. You'd have to really look at the totality of the circumstances and also decide whether or not their conduct went into illegal or maybe even acted in a discriminatory way. So
yeah, I think that's the bar, right? Were they illegal? Were they discriminating? Were they harassing? Were they breaking a law? Then that's a different story. The one thing I do want to point out, Chuck, because it's in the first sentence of this question. Can I hold an employee responsible for behavior that they participated or demonstrated? And so what if they're demonstrating, right? What if they're out at a demonstration, whatever the demonstration is, they're at a demonstration. Boy, you really want to be careful with that, right? Because if it's a legal demonstration, and they're not doing anything illegal, I would not get involved in that conversation. Right? Somebody sees them there and they're demonstrating legally for something that maybe you disagree with. I would be very careful about holding them accountable for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Good discussion. Listeners, we would love to hear, if you follow our links in the show notes below, love to hear what you think about this one. Or jump on our Team at HR Stories or the HR Team of One Facebook page and chime in. Let's see where you land on this. Excellent. All right, our next question, John, And
Yes.
one of our answers is, we have a checklist for this. Woo, woo. Okay. So this person writes from the HR team of one community, I need some advice from any HR director or hire in regards to merger and acquisition. Specifically, I'm looking for a timeline. I need to provide a timeline of all things HR that we will need to do pre and post transaction. So she says, for example, I-9 audits being done a month before closing or whatever the time frame is. Can someone please assist me in finding a checklist with time frame for that?
Well, Chuck, that's you. You have been through this merger and acquisition thing numerous times, and you created our checklist for the Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. So what you should do, what should be that process, right? And so we don't know if it's a merger or acquisition. And I think that matters. I would guess that matters because a merger could be bringing two people to versus if you're being taken over, that's a different thing. So give us your wisdom on this, Chuck.
Oh, sure. You know what? And I got to tell you, I did not load up that checklist, but if you join the HR team of one community, we are going to provide that checklist to the community this week. So that'll be in the files on that HR team of one Facebook page. But I did focus on the I-9s. Well, just a couple of general things when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. You know, as an HR person, your job is the communication. You got two entities coming together, and someone's got to be there saying what's going on here, letting these folks know what's going on here. They're going to be looking to someone for answers. And if you're the company and you're the HR person in the company that's being taken over, your employees, including your senior leaders, are looking to you for answers. And the vice versa. If you're the company coming in and you're the HR person, those folks are going to look to you for a lot of answers. What's going to happen to my benefits? What's going to happen to my vacation? What's going to happen to, I requested next week off. So things like that. But when it comes to some of the other things, and this person asked about the I-9s, and I had to share, John, based on my experience. And I told her, I said, if you have any influence over this process, I would suggest for the I-9s that on the close date, when you close on that transaction, that you box up all the I-9s, all the employee files, all the old applications, and you ship them to the former owners. You get them out of your office because you want to start with I-9s that are fresh. And usually most transactions like this will let you get to the employees a week before and put them through your hiring process. And why is that important? Because if you accept the old company's I-9s, the old company's background check results, the old company, basically, especially the I-9s, if you accept them, you're stuck with them and you accept all of their liability going back several years because you have them. So it is best to get rid of them and start over. So that was my advice.
Yeah, no, and I think, again, that's good, right? And I think you're thinking about, I'm coming in, I'm acquiring your company. That means the employee identification number is going away. That company is going away. That company is being dismissed. Sometimes, though, the acquisition is, hey, we're now the owners of your company, but you're still a company. Nothing's happening differently except for the chief executive officer. Everything else is staying the same. And so you need to be aware of that. Let me give you an example, Chuck. So my wife worked for a small consulting company out of DC, and a large commercial real estate company bought the company. And the only thing that really changed at first was that the CEO was no longer the CEO. The owner was no longer the CEO. She had a different title, blah, blah, blah. right? And so the company still exists, still had the federal employment identification number, all that was there. And then over time, they were able to give them better benefits and that kind of stuff, right? And so again, it depends on where you are in that process. But I do like the thought of like, we need to think about, what are we doing with the old files? What are we doing with that information? Because can be a new company taking over. The other point that I thought was brilliant was you're that communication hub. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times, and Chuck, tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of the times you're in the midst of this emotional, oh my gosh, I'm working for a company now, I'm not working, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know my role.
Yeah.
You have to kind of forget that and put that aside and say, I'm here, I'm going to help all my employees to the best of my knowledge, and then I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to have my meltdown later on, right? And so kind of some of that time, it's hard, but you have to do it.
Yeah. It's really hard, especially when you deal with some of those really confident senior leaders that know everything and they're completely in the dark sometimes. And you, as the HR person, know more than them. And they're coming to you saying, hey. Right. So this person says, I got a call from our HR at our parent company. So I guess, there's maybe the corporate or the home office HR person calls and says, hey, you down at this division, whatever, you're getting an interim CFO. And that was news to me. I hadn't heard anything, and I report to her. I don't think he was supposed to tell me. Like the HR person, her home office HR person wasn't supposed to tell her. So she talks about how they had let some people go, the CEO go in early February, March without warning, and he had only been with them for a year. Now I am getting a little nervous about my job. I'm 6 months pregnant, and we know managers aren't supposed to discriminate, but I know we do. And I'm the HR manager with a recruiter and a part-time payroll person. I've been with the company 15 months. I've got a great review. I've got 8% increase. She says they didn't have HR before I got here. I'm being told I'm doing a great job. I'm not getting any complaints. And so she's venting, basically. She's like, I'm not sure if I'm venting, if I'm scared. I'm looking for advice on what to do. And it was interesting to see some of the responses from some of the folks. A lot of the folks were like, look, you can't change what you're not going to change. Just keep on keeping on, stay looking forward, keep doing a great job. My thought was document any interactions. Once again, keep doing a great job, but maintain regular and fluid communication with your HR leader. And when that new CFO starts, you've got to establish a relationship with that person on day one. You need to go in, you need to be ready. You need to think like they would think. What are the questions they're going to ask? What are the basics? How many employees? How much turnover? I don't know, but think of those things. Go in and be the answer person, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. What do you think?
No, that's good advice. And I was thinking along the same lines. Is this happens, right? This happens to us all the time. I was working for a company, and I don't remember how much it was, but maybe in a 3-year period, I had 4 different bosses. They were doing reorgs and shuffles and moving things around. And I will tell you, by the second one, I'm like, all right, this is it. I am creating a book on what John does at the company. Like, what do my departments do? Not what I do, but what do my departments do at the company? What we do really well? What are the challenges? And literally, when my third boss came in, I'm like, here, read this. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer you. Right? And, you just get to that point where you just like, all right, well, I'm here. I'm doing my job. And I've always had like, look, if you're going to fire me, I'm talented enough. I can go somewhere else. And I know a lot of people, like if you're 6 months pregnant, that's not what you're thinking, right? And so I get that level of nervousness. I get that level of anxiety. But I do think on that first day, I would definitely reach out to the HR person and say, hey, this is great news. I'm glad the CFO is coming. Can I build a stronger relationship? I know there's a lot going on right now. But I want to connect with you. I want to make sure I have a strong relationship with you. How is the best way to do that? Can we meet once a week or once every 2 weeks just to have a quick touch base? Hey, this is what we're doing. I want to make sure that we're doing it the way you want it done. And then the same thing with the CFO to come in and say, look, this is where we are. This is what's happening. And I would also start thinking about who's going to replace you when you're out. Don't let them make that decision for you. Come up with a plan. And so if you're going to be on maternity leave for 12 weeks, you're going to take your full FMLA, come up and say, look, this is what I planned. I talked to so-and-so and I want them to handle this. And because the CFO is going to be overwhelmed. And if you can take one thing off their plate, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Do you feel comfortable? I mean, really comfortable, because they're going to be taking over your role when you're not here. So, right. And that's me, the CFO, asking those questions. And it becomes important, right, to play that out and to kind of see some of that and be prepared. Look, you're already doing the job well. You're already gotten great raises. You got great reviews. Know that it's a different expectation now. And find out what those are and meet those expectations.
Excellent. The owner of our company is trying to rehire an employee that voluntarily left, but is awful for our culture and doesn't fit our core values. So I'm guessing this is the HR person saying this, right? I've made this point numerous times, but it seems to go in one ear and out the other. I have no idea what this person, I'd never heard of anything like this before happening. Yes, and it happens all the time. Okay, that's what I've experienced. One ear out the other. They're not great for the culture. They don't fit the core values. Anyways, this person says, I would love advice on how to really get this to sink in.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't remember exactly what I said, but when you read it to me this time, I was flipping it in my head, right? I was thinking about the time that I was a supervisor and the HR person was like, I don't know, John, I don't know if they're a right fit. And I'm like, no, they're going to be great. I think they're going to be great. And they're like, no, I don't really know. And in that moment, what could have been said to get me to change my mind probably would have been different. And I'm always thinking about, how do we set this up in the beginning, right? How do we do this so that person, in this case, the owner, but in most cases it's probably a hiring manager, that they understand how important the culture is to the organization, or the culture is to the team, right? How the team works together and how important it is there, right? Because sometimes we see this expert as a manager or supervisor, we'll see this expert like, oh my God, that's exactly what we need. We can bring them in, blah, blah, blah. I'm not worried about that, right? And so having that conversation early on about before we're interviewing anybody, talking about the importance of culture, talking about the importance of teamwork. When we're hiring somebody, we have to keep in mind, will they work well with the rest of the team, right? And so balancing that. Yeah. So again, that's kind of my first kind of throw out there. I know it's a little different than my answer, but I think that was what popped in my head when you kind of
I'll tell you what you said. I'll tell you what you said. It was actually and that was a good answer. And your answer was right spot on. It says, look, at times there's nothing you can do. Try one last time to get your point across. Provide examples. Like you said, show those examples of how this could impact the team. And if they don't listen, document it. Document the conversation, and maybe hope they will learn. That's pretty much what Elizabeth, who is like super user. Elizabeth, shout out to you, Elizabeth H. She says, since he's the owner's, Elizabeth answers all these questions. She's fantastic, right? She says, since he's the owner, others also disagree with the decision to bring the person back, but there's not much you can do if he's already aware. So he's already aware how everyone feels. If you continue to push, then they may very well label you as the problem.
Yeah, good point.
So I'm like, Elizabeth, you rock. You are absolutely right. So, yep, folks, that's about it. There's not much you can do, but some great answers there. Thank you, John.
What's the best way to develop a time off policy? What should I think about? And I'm going to be honest to you, Chuck. This is coming from me. So I want you to give me some information. I just figured we do it right on the podcast instead of, us talking behind the scenes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So I got exempt, I got non-exempt employees. I need to create some kind of annual time off policy. What do I need to be thinking about?
I guess, well, first of all, you need to think about what's standard in your industry. You need to think about recruiting and retention. So is my time off policy enough to entice someone to recruit them to come here? Is it enough to retain them? Are you going to have a vacation policy plus a sick time policy plus holidays? Okay. Or are you going to take vacation and sick pay, roll them all together and call it PTO, right? The other thing is you got to take a look at the laws in your area. For example, Chicago, New York. And I'll just tell you, Chicago has requirements for employees that work in Chicago, of companies that have employees. If you're in Chicago, you get paid time off, okay? Yeah. But then you also get paid sick leave. And those are two different policies. So you might not even have a choice, Right. So I guess, John, look at the laws, look at what is common in your industry, look to see if it's enticing enough to recruit people, decide whether you're going to have separate vacation policies, sick pay, sick days, and holidays, or are you going to roll it all into one, call it PTO, plus holidays, those types of things. The other thing is, are you going to accrue it? And what I mean by that is I've worked for different companies, and it's always best to do it this way. My opinion is that I look at my paycheck this week and look, I accrued 3.65 hours of PTO this week, John. Great. Next week, another 3.69. Next, I've built up 9 or 10 hours of PTO. But where is that PTO? Has it been accrued? The best way I really think to do it is companies will accrue that money as actual dollars into a different account on their books. And so it might have a value of $100,000, and that money should be there. Okay. And and then when people want to take PTO, they want to take vacation or something along those lines, it comes out of that fund rather than the regular operating fund going forward. I'll give you an example where that's beneficial. Some industries experience highs and lows. And so during low times, employee hours may be cut. So you encourage people, hey, you have a big bank of PTO. Why don't you take the PTO? Because that comes out of a different funding source. Yeah, so if you cut back a day and you got 32 hours, you take 8 hours from your PTO if you want to do that, right? And then that doesn't affect the profit and loss because that money has already been accrued. The other thing you want to keep in mind, John, is payout at the end of the employee's term with the company. So do you pay it all out no matter what, whether you whether it's a voluntary or an involuntary termination? Do you have something where you say, hey, you might have voluntarily left and you gave proper notice and you can get your PTO paid out, but you need to be here at least maybe 6 months.
Right.
Okay. Is there a cap on how much PTO someone can accrue? I worked for a company. They didn't put a cap on it. I started working. There were people that had been there for years. They had thousands, 1,000 hours, hundreds of hours, almost 1,000 hours of accrued vacation and PTO. And you know what they said? They said, that's my retirement. When I leave, I'm cashing that out. I'm like, well, if you leave voluntarily, yeah. But if you leave it, and then if you do have that policy where you don't pay out because you terminate someone, rather than, then you need to be consistent with that. Geez, I really feel sorry. We fired them. We're going to give them their PTO or vacation. Okay, that could cause discrimination. So there's a number of things. Maybe that could be a whole checklist, John, for our next version of the HR Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition, which we just released, folks, as we've talked about before.
Yeah. And so here's my question for you in terms of, you talked about vacation and sick and holidays versus PTO, personal time off. Do you have a preference as an HR director which one employees get?
Yeah, I like putting PTO all together for vacation and sick pay. Here's the deal. There's companies, and I've worked for companies where, hey, we have sick pay. And if you don't use it, you lose it. Or, you know, that sort of thing. So guess what happens?
People use it.
Yeah. People are sick at least 5 days a year. They do that, right? Because if not, I lose it or it caps out. And so what good is sick pay if I can't use it? PTO usually is unencumbered, has no restrictions. You know, I'm going to take a couple of days off to go walk my dog. I don't know. I'm sick. I am going to use PTO, but you're not forced to lie. Okay.
Right.
And so that's what I prefer.
Yeah. Nah, me too. I prefer PTO too. I think it's better. I really don't care that what you're doing outside of work. All I care is that you're not here. And that's all I care about. Use your time. I've given you so much time. I want you to use it. I do know that the use it and lose it policy is not legal in some states.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
California, Nebraska, and there's another one. I can't think of it. And so paying attention to that, folks, just kind of doing that as well. All right, so we got it. What about in terms of notification? How much time should an employee tell me when they're going to be out on PTO?
You know, it depends. A lot of companies want at least before the next schedule is developed and out. If you're a regular like office and it doesn't really matter, say, hey, next week I'm going to take a day off. I think it's a lot of times people say, oh, you need 2 weeks. You know, it's our policy. You know, if emergencies happen, things come up, things happen. I think that's really between the manager and the employee to kind of figure that out. So I don't know. I don't really have a good answer for that one.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'm a big schedule coordinator, and I know that when somebody's not going to be here, we have to backfill. We got to figure that out. I want as much advance notice as possible, understanding that they can't give me notice that they're going to be sick. Right?
Yeah. So Joel says, I work for Amazon, and starting January 1st, 2025, they want me to be back in the office, right? So they've given him some couple of months notice. So they want me to be back in the office 5 days a week. Can they change the agreement they had with me when I was hired that I would only need to work 3 days a week? I guess he's talking about 3 days a week in the office, 2 days off. So what do you think, John? Can they do that? Those scoundrels.
Yeah, and I think I think that one of the things we as employees have to understand is that our companies can change our work arrangement, our job description at their will. They could come in tomorrow and say, hey, Chuck, you're not going to be the HR director. We want you to be the food and beverage manager. Enjoy yourself. Make sure you do that really well job. So they can do that. So Amazon, it has in their control to make that decision. You also, Joel, being a person that works in Virginia, you have the right to employment at will, which means that you can leave at a moment's notice. Right? And you could be like, hey, I'm going to leave. I don't have to give a reason. I'm leaving. And I'm going to go work for another company that gives me that flexibility. And so it's really interesting to kind of play that out on a bigger thing. And now you have to decide, Joel, is it worth for you to do that? Right? And so you can make that there. Now, one of the things that I will say, Joel didn't get into this, but what if Joel was asking for an accommodation, right? If he was asking for accommodation because he had a disability, he would fall under the Americans with Disability Act, and then we would have to make sure that we get into that.
Yeah, right. Right. No, those are all good points. And it is, I understand it's disruptive and you feel like we made an agreement and there's a breach of trust. But if we're looking at the legality of things, unless there's a state or a local regulation, there's nothing saying that Amazon can't change that. We're all employees at will.
Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week for all that new content to prepare you for 2025.